Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock on Tuesday, December 21st, 2021. I'd like to call to order the Administration Committee meeting. Could we have roll call, please?
Supervisor Long.
Here.
Supervisor Cook.
Present.
Supervisor Ard.
Present.
Supervisor Peterson.
Here.
And Supervisor Peavy is excused.
And we have minutes to approve from our last meeting, Tuesday, November 16th. Any edits or comments or changes to those minutes? Hearing none, the minutes will stand as published. Public comment. Do we have anyone from the public that would like to comment on our meeting tonight? Any public comment? Okay, we'll move on to our business items. First, the financial report for November 2021.
Yeah, when you look at the financial report, and one of the things I was looking at was the amount of percent remaining, especially on the expense category side. Anything that's over 15%, 15% would be 2 months worth, and really with the financial report through November, you have all of December, and then you have runover expenses into January. So if we can see at least 2 months worth of expenses left over, that usually means we're pretty safe. And going through all of the budgets, they are all at or above 15% remaining on their expenses. So I'd anticipate everyone will be within budget at the end of 2021. You can see that bottom percentage right here on total expenses on each of the budgets. That's kind of what I went through and looked at this point in time this year. So, unless there's any I will point out one other thing. We have a new report that our finance director has created. There it is. And this is that Arpa status report. So this is showing the projects that were budgeted in 2021. We'll add the 2022 projects once they're authorized, or once the new year starts. They have been approved by the county board. We'll add those in. And you can see that we do have some expenses so far. And we did have one electronic records. That's actually a 2022 is when we planned it, but Bob started spending some money because it actually runs out at 2021, at the end of 21, and so he had to get it started for 22. But otherwise, we're all good on our ARPA projects so far. But you can see the status report, just like our KIP projects. We'll have this in the packet every month with updates. Now, are there any other questions?
Questions? One quick one for you on page 30. There was other operating supplies for facilities. Sorry, Jim. Yep. Just curious. That was kind of a large red number, so the red ones catch my eye.
Yeah. Other operating supplies. Yep. Jim's making his way to the podium, and he will give you an explanation, I'm sure.
Always know you're looking. So this is where we were putting our COVID expenses, the extra cleaning that we were having to do throughout the beginning of the year. So we created our own little categories so we knew which was which, and so we could split it out.
So that all occurred in November?
No, sir. It actually stopped in April and started in January. So it's been occurring through.
Yeah, the financial report is through November, but it's not just November.
Okay.
So it's the full
Gotcha.
11 months of the year so far. And that expense then will be offset by other federal grants. So you see other federal payments up here of $555,000 that have come into the facilities. And part of it is for that expense if it's a COVID-related expense. So.
Other questions? Okay, let's move on to the second business item, consideration of tax deed bids for the Village of Baldwin.
Good afternoon. Last month, this committee set a value on this property in the Village of Baldwin. It's a rather large building. You set the value of $30,000, and I published it, as I'm required to do by statute, for 3 weeks in the Star Observer and the Baldwin Bulletin, a local paper. Facilities Director Jim Ellsbury showed the property to three different people, and we did receive one bid on the property. So you set the value of $30,000. The bid came in at $30,100 with a certified check of 10% down. The bidder is Amy Drinken, and she is present in the audience today. And if you have any questions on the property, I think you reviewed it last month with photos.
Seeing as we were figuring that was a fair value on it, in my recollection, I guess I would move at this time that we accept the offer as submitted.
I'll second.
Discussion. I guess I would just add that seeing that it was the only bid and we were kind of perplexed at what to do with this property last time around, it seems like the logical thing to do. Any other questions or discussion? I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of accepting the bid signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the third item, resolution establishing the broadband grant programs and amending the 2022 budget.
Yeah, so we received our broadband report last month, or this month, at the county board meeting. And so we want to get moving on this right away, mainly because the next round of grants available from the state, and I think there's $100 million available from the state PSC, is coming up in March. One of the I sat through a webinar on that grant program, and one of the things that they score points for is community involvement in the grant application. And so it doesn't say to what extent that contribution has to be, but the more local partners they get to sign on, the more points they score, and the higher the point scores on the grant, the more likely they are to receive it, and that's bringing more dollars into St. Croix County then. So I have talked with some of the providers of internet service within the county, and I know that they are looking at writing those grants. So if we can sign on and become a partner with them in those applications, that'll be beneficial. So that's the first part of the grant application proposal that I would have. Let's see, where did it go? Yeah, so those provider matches. So a couple of things with that grant that I would create then with our ARPA dollars is it does have to provide 100 meg service. So any provider that wants to partner with us has to have at least 100 meg service that they're providing with the extension of service. I have it just for this PSC grant application deadline. I think we'll use all the money we have. We have about 1.5 million available. Quite frankly, I think we could spend 3 million if we had it available. I think we'll have enough applications talking with the providers in the county that I think that's how much they would be looking at writing the grants for us to match, if we're going to match at 25%, which is what I have in here. And then for the selection of which grants to partner with, I would create a 3-member panel So I'm recommending that you allow the county administrator to appoint that three-member panel. If it's appointed by the county board or by the administration committee, it becomes a child of the government, subject to open meeting laws. If it's just a work group that the county administrator creates, it has different rules and responsibilities. And really, it's just the review of the grant applications, which would all be probably confidential or closed session anyways. So this just makes it administratively a little bit easier to do. So I would probably appoint Supervisor Cook. She has expressed interest. I'd probably appoint Supervisor Burning. He has expressed interest. And then one other yet to be determined member that may be interested in serving on it. So first of all, are there any questions on that part of the proposal or resolution that we're looking at?
So that's strictly the PSC grant program that we'd be signing on with the provider.
Yep, so basically, we're saying any providers in the county, if you want to write one of these PSC grants, there actually is another federal grant that's available. The rules are a lot more restrictive, and I don't know if any providers are actually going to write that, but theoretically, I guess they could. We would say we would partner on that. We have money available, we will be a partner for you, we will sign on this three-member panel, then we'll pick which programs or which projects we would sign on to.
So our 25%, does that have to be available right away? Do we set that aside? Do we wait to see if they get the grants, or
Yeah,
how does that work?
We set aside 1.5 million of Arpa dollars. So I have, we received 8.8 million. 1.5 of that, the county board reserved for broadband. So I have that amount that's currently available. That's not in the 2022 budget. It's not allocated anywhere. It's not showing up on that Arpa spreadsheet I just showed you yet. So that's how much is I think, available right now. We get another 8.8 million in May. And quite frankly, by the time we spend this, I mean, you could reach out and grab some of that money if you really wanted to increase the dollar amount available. I think that's a good talking point for us to have this evening. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but 1.5 million is currently, I think, sitting there for us to use.
Other questions before we move on to the second item?
All right. So this program provides, that we just talked about, provides providers with the ability to extend their infrastructure to serve homes within the county. But that's not going to cover every home in the county. And that's probably not a realistic expectation that in the next 5 years every home is going to have fiber to their house. So I wanted to create a secondary program that can pick up the gaps there that we have. So there is a satellite. It's the Starlink Low Earth Satellite program that I know of. There may be some other ones out there that meet the criteria. I just happen to know that that one does. They do provide over 100 meg service, which is one of the requirements. So this is a household direct grant for any house that does not have the ability to connect to fiber. So if you have fiber that runs in front of your house already and you just don't want to connect to it, you're not eligible for this grant. This is to connect those people that don't have that opportunity. And it's a $500 grant, which would basically cover your upfront connection fee. But it's something to recognize that not every home is going to have an option for fiber immediately. So.
That Starlink, I think, is that going to involve having put up more towers? Because if I'm...
No. No, Starlink is a low Earth satellite. It's that Elon Musk program where he launches many, many thousands of satellites. And they orbit lower in the Earth's atmosphere, so they have a shorter latency time for connection. That's why he's able to provide the higher speeds. But it's not related to towers at all. It is directly from what you put on your house to connect to the satellites up above.
I may be misspeaking or have forgotten correctly, but John had told me, and I thought it was Starlink he was talking about, said it was available in a lot of places. So I went and checked and my address, and it said, no, it's not available there. And that's why I wondered if it took a tower, or maybe I was thinking of another program. Why wouldn't it be available? I'm wondering.
Yeah. I know it's available at least in parts of St. Croix County, because I know of residents that have connected to it. I've sort of talked to them, and they're fairly happy with the service that they're getting. But I mean, it's better than what they had before. Probably not the same as a fiber connection, but it's a step in the right direction. So yeah, I guess I don't know if it covers the entire county or not, but I know it is available in at least parts of St. Croix County.
So, and then what do you think the cost is going to be, and how does that relate to
Yeah.
the 1.5 you referenced in number
Right.
1?
So it's the same pot of money that we have available. I think it's $1,503,000, so that leaves about $3,000 left over for this, which would be 6 people. But I don't know how popular this is going to be. I don't know that a lot of people are going to sign up for this program, but I think it's important to have it available so that when somebody calls and says, well, you're not bringing fiber by my house, what am I supposed to do? Well, okay, so here's our alternative. So I think it's really a plan B, and I don't think it's going to be used a whole lot, but I think it's important to have the plan B option available. So it'll come out of the same pool of money.
And the third item?
Yeah, the third item is really more FYI, because I know it would be something that we'd probably discuss if there wasn't a program available for it. There is an FCC program, though, about affordable connectivity, and this is a program that's income-based, and it's to help with the monthly cost of your internet service. So I think the current program is at $50 a month. I think this new program that kicks in January 1 is only at $30 a month. So it is just an offset to what your internet connection costs are. And again, it's an income-based program. But I did want to make sure that we knew it was available and that we're letting the public know that this program is out there and available for them if this is what their issues are. Because I think when we went through the results of the broadband study, a lot of what we heard was about being able to connect, but also about the cost of the service. So what we're doing to address that is there's an affordability if you're an income-based. We're helping with upfront cost if you're don't have fiber as an option. And we're offsetting the costs for the service providers, which we're kind of taking that chance, but by reducing their costs, they shouldn't be passing that cost on to the consumers then. If they get a 50% grant from the PSC, 25% from us, and they have 25% in, then they should have less costs that they have to pass on to the consumers. So that's what we're doing in relation to the cost of internet access in St. Croix County.
So how does this then relate back to the broadband study and the excuse me, the recommendations that were made by Design 9?
Yeah, I think that a couple of the recommendations, the tower ring that they wanted to do, the dark fiber ring that they have in there, very expensive projects. Those projects, while they create an infrastructure for future growth, don't serve a single property. What I focused more on was the direct-to-home connection, because we have a limited amount of resources. So I thought it was a more direct, more immediate impact with the dollars that we have available. And I think we can use some of those heat maps that they have that showed where the really poor connectivity areas are of the county. When the 3-member panel sits down and reviews which grant applications they're going to award, I think that's going to be one of the tools that they'll use in determining what areas get a grant and maybe what areas wouldn't get a grant.
I want to thank our Administrator Witt for the plan here, I think it's a good start. Like, I think it's something that helps us serve people who are being unserved now, or at least gets the ball rolling for that. I would like to see us, I don't want to see us just put the broadband plan on the shelf. Like, I think there are recommendations in there that we could look at some more, and whether that's the 3-member panel that reviews that at some point and says, okay, well, here we've done these first parts now what else can the county do? Like, if we're talking about the fiber ring, you know, do we look at our transportation planning process where we could install a conduit in the ground or things like that, that could make the whole project cheaper. But I think that's something that I would like to see the county still talk about going forward. But I think it's a good start. We don't want to lose the opportunity to apply for those state grants. And so, you know, I'd like to see that. There is, with the infrastructure bill that was recently passed, or, you know, a few months ago, I know they're still working on the rules for that broadband funding in there. So there's a lot of potential opportunity there. If we, you know, in the next, I think they said the rules may come out mid next year or something like that. So we have a little bit of time to still talk about how there could be more federal money that we can use to even expand service even more. But I think this is a good start. And I would like to also see with the Affordable Connectivity Program, hopefully the county can be an active partner in sharing more information about that, because there's a lot of criteria for eligibility, and some of those are, you know, if you get free or reduced lunch for children. So I think there's a lot of school children too that could potentially benefit from that, and hopefully we can partner with school districts. But I think it's a good start, and I just don't want us to stop at this. I'd like to have further conversations about it. So I would make a motion that we approve the resolution establishing the broadband grant program and amending the 2022 budget.
I'll second. Any more discussion? I would agree with you, Supervisor Cook. I think it's a great start, but we need to keep at it, and we need to stay focused to make sure that we're doing a good job of serving those that are not being served. So,
Yes, I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
yes, Supervisor.
In looking at the Starlink service grid, it appears it has a significant amount of coverage in the East Metro, which of course is closest to our border. However, for western Wisconsin, there's little to nothing as far as coverage goes. Now, that may expand. However, an article that was recently in PC Mag, which I like to follow, stated that they're throttling down on what they're able to provide. So while I think this is a good stepping stone in providing services that persons in our county may not otherwise be able to obtain, I think we need to look at any service providers that are out there that actually have service going into Wisconsin at this time, because it doesn't appear that Starlink has coverage, with the exception of a few places in eastern Wisconsin. And although we may be able to bounce off from that coverage that's coming into the Twin Cities Metro, it may not be the best service or the most consistent service. So if we can all just take a minute at some point and take a look and see who else is possibly opening into this market, and make that part of this availability for service.
And that program is not a Starlink program. I use them only as an example of a provider that I'm aware of that would meet the criteria. I'm not aware of another provider that meets 100 meg service that's not fiber, but if there's one out there and they're eligible, this program will apply for them.
Any further discussion? Now, this is a budget amendment. At a committee level, do we need a roll call vote or not? Not at the committee level. I didn't think so. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments or discussion? I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the resolution establishing broadband grant programs signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ken, for putting that together. All right, we'll move on to a resolution of amending the rules and bylaws to allow for remote attendance.
Yeah, there was some discussion about this recently. I think it was brought up as a future agenda item by Supervisor Otino. So this is one of the solutions available to the county board to allow for remote attendance. We actually have a provision currently that allows for 2 meetings per year for county supervisors to attend a county board meeting remotely. We've added a modification that is date-specific just for the next 3 months and opens that provision up to all committees, commissions, and boards of the county. So whether it's snow-related or whether it's virus-related, whatever the reasons may be, for the next 3 months, this provision would allow for Zoom attendance for voting members of any of our boards, committees, or commissions. There are other options available, and we'd be happy to discuss other ideas with you or any other ideas that you may have.
Supervisor Peterson?
I think the proposal looks pretty fine to me. I'm thinking that'll get us to into March, and if need be, if it looks like things are still going south, we could always extend it again. But also that brings us to the time when there will be a new board, fairly new board, so that way we're leaving options open to them to do whatever they want to do at that time. Just my thoughts.
Other comments? I think it seemed pretty reasonable. I guess for me, I'm a little surprised that we've had that flexibility and nobody's used it yet, and all of a sudden they want more, which kind of surprised me. But I guess a lot of it is due to our COVID spike, and so this is a good way of providing some additional flexibility. It also gives us actually a little test at the committee level, because we did extend flexibility to the board, but not committees, just so we could kind of test the waters. So this may be a way of testing the waters a little more. So I will go ahead and move that we approve the resolution to amend the bylaws for remote attendance.
I'll second.
The only other question I would have is, since this is temporary, it's actually amended into the bylaws, so what happens at the end of March?
So what our office will do is at the end of March, we're going to remove that provision from the bylaws, and there'll be a new set of bylaws issued.
Any discussion, comments? Okay, seeing none, I guess we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the resolution amending the rules and bylaws to allow remote attendance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Now, that is, January 4th is the next county board meeting. This has to be adopted at the county board, so while I do say January 1, probably technically January 5th, but
Close enough.
yeah. Just want to point that out. You have to come in person to vote for this.
Unless you use your exemption that year.
Right. Yes.
So there'll be a mass application for exemption, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, be ready for that, Dave.
What if nobody answers?
Actually, I think there already has been a request.
Okay, let's move on to number 5, resolution amending personnel policies and procedures handbook. Hi,
Good
Tara.
evening. We have 3 today. 2 of them were already existing policies, and there was just general formatting and adding different statements. So I'll start with 7.2, gifts and gratuities. This was already in Article 9, Section 4 in our current handbook. Again, just general formatting, and then we added a purpose statement for that one. And then for 7.3, political activity, again, that was in Article 9, Section 6 in the current handbook, and that was formatting and the addition of purpose and definition sections. In some of our redefining, we did use some info from Dunn and Barron. We often look at our other cohorts and other counties to see what they're using for best practice too, so we kind of all collaborated about that. And then the third one was the solicitation, and this is a new policy, and actually this one generated the most discussion. We actually had staff advisory this morning, and this one came up again. Some of the thoughts around this is employees just wanted to make sure that the intent was clear and that employees would understand that aren't part of staff advisory what they can and can't do from a perspective of solicitation. So when we say solicitation for our employees, they want to make sure it's okay to still put a sign-up sheet for cookies in the break room or for pizzas and things like that without violating the policy. And we did assure them that they could, but some of them felt like maybe it wasn't clear. And so we wanted to see if to you the intent of the policy seemed clear, or if we needed to add any clarifying language to say, yes, you can still do that. But that was really the only concern, not that they didn't agree that we shouldn't be soliciting the public or soliciting each other by means of going up to someone in person and asking them to donate, but if you put a sign-up sheet in the back or something along those lines, that would be acceptable. So any thoughts on that or questions? And I don't know if, Ken, did I cover what you felt? Okay.
Any questions? Any thoughts on the solicitation?
I guess I'm thinking the explanation of it, limited being, if you put a sheet up if you want to sign up for something, I would,
I guess our question is the way that we wrote it, because when our admin team looked at it, we knew what the intent was. The staff advisory was more confused by the description. So when you read the intent of the policy and the guidelines that we have laid out, do you read it the same way that we were thinking of it? Or do you think there's some clarification, additional clarifications needed? You're kind of like the judge in this case, deciding which side is right, yeah.
There's a lot of of things that could fit into that category, but how are you going to name each one individually? So I don't know, would some kind of statement, if there is would there be a way to resolve if there is a question or an issue that, how are you going to define, like you say, every specific incident? I don't know. I'm open to suggestions on that.
It's almost like the more you try to clarify, the muddier the waters get. So it may be better for it to be a little broader, I guess, in my opinion. Supervisor Cook?
Yeah, I guess I see it's a little bit confusing to me, because it seems like the first part in the policy where it says employees may engage in limited solicitation, so I'm assuming that's kind of what you're referencing, and limited solicitation distribution of materials, subject to the guidelines within the policy, but then solicitation guidelines, the first bullet says solicitation or distribution of materials is prohibited. So it's prohibited, but it's allowed, I guess.
But it's prohibited during the working time.
Right, so does that include putting out your
So it is,
cookie
there
thing?
appears to be a contraindication because you're stating in one line that it is prohibited during the working time, but then it also states that you may not solicit anyone after working hours. So you can't return to the property after you're finished working to solicit anyone. So you put it in rather a catch-22.
I think the intent was we would not want employees to, I don't want to say actively solicit, but if they want to put something up for people to sign up on their own, we were okay with that, but we didn't want them going from office to office or person to person trying to solicit them to buy something or contribute to something. So I think that's where it is a little bit loose, I understand. It's not completely black and white, but yes, you may do this on your break time or free time, put up a flyer for someone to sign up to buy something, but don't be going to each person asking them individually, was kind of the intent.
Then I think you've made your policy statement right there. that an employee may post a sign or sign-up sheet within the employee break room, if that's appropriate, for other employees to engage in and/or contact information.
So we have some suggested language that we could potentially decide on now, if that's appropriate. So some of the language that would be, for that policy statement, would be employees may engage in limited solicitation and distribution of materials to other employees on the premises during breaks and only in non-public areas. County resources shall not be used in the promotion or distribution of the solicitation. Employees will not engage in solicitation of the public. Does that make it more clear?
It defines it better. However, it still, I don't think it truly says, we really didn't want you distributing pamphlets to everyone's department. We'd rather have you put it on a bulletin board with your contact information if you're selling Girl Scout cookies or peanut butter bars or something.
Okay.
Contact me in the off hours. I think if it's short, sweet, and to the point, because you're asking them to do one thing.
Right.
And that's put a post up, have people contact you by your contact number, or sign up for the softball team.
So do we take this away and then revise and bring back?
Keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay.
So Tara's asking if you want to have her make some revisions and bring this back next month, or if you're willing to make a modification tonight to it. What's your preference?
I think we can make a modification tonight
Okay.
if we're
Yeah.
getting rid of, if we're going to overhaul the language that's confusing
Right.
and just make it a simple statement.
Okay.
This is what you can do. Post it,
Sure.
contact people after work, have them contact you.
If she wants to wordsmith it, could we just give her the understanding to wordsmith it and maybe just shoot us a copy when it's done? You know, we don't have to hold a special meeting or anything, we're okay with it as is?
Sure, it's got to go to county board anyways with the modifications, so.
Okay.
Modification as worked out by the HR director and Supervisor Ard.
Okay, sounds good. I'll take that away. Any other questions on the policies that I can answer? Okay.
So we'll need a motion for the resolution as per a future amendment. Moved by Supervisor Peterson.
Second.
Second, Supervisor Ard. Any further discussion or comments? Seeing none, we'll be ready to vote. All those in favor of the resolution amending personnel policies and procedures with the amendments to section 7.4, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Tara. That one's a little tough. Okay, let's talk about consideration of the 2023 budgeting process and timeline. And I missed discussion of compensation planning. Sorry, number 6 for public employees. Sorry about that.
So with the CPI Index and just some conversations that I had had last week, I asked Supervisor Long if I could add this item to the agenda, just as a discussion item. And if there's any interest in one or all of these, then I can invest some staff time into actually developing them and bringing them back for formal action. But a CPI of 6.8% and a step increase we have in the 2022 budget, giving a 1.5% to 2.5% increase to the employees with no COLA adjustment to the grid. It's just not getting us very far in staying competitive. The vacancies that we're having and the trouble we're filling the positions is continuing and growing. So I have a couple of ideas, and none of them are home run solutions, but they help a little bit. And since those ideas are, we could use our 2021 and 2022 contingency funds and do a COLA adjustment mid-year. So a 1% COLA adjustment to the wage grid is $300,000. Those two contingency funds are $100,000 each. So we'd get part of a year, so I could implement it midway through the year for that COLA adjustment. That does technically create a structural deficit going into 2023 by that dollar amount. But it's relatively small in the big picture of what we have available. It's just going to eat into what they get the following year. They're going to get it earlier. So that's one idea of how to adjust, and that addresses mostly the CPI. It's getting us closer, not very much, but a little bit closer to that CPI cost. The second issue we have is compression issues within the different departments. So some of the issues we have when employees are leaving has to do with compression, and the new employees that we're bringing on, we're paying as much or more than our seasoned employees are making. So that creates this compression issue for us. And we've done this in the past. We've come back with different departments, and we've adjusted specific employees and employees that meet specific criteria, additional steps to pull that compression back apart, so that we're recognizing the longevity employees have had with us, the experience they've had with us, and over the new employees that are starting. So compression, I think we have several departments that have compression issues. I haven't done a full analysis of that yet or what that cost may be, but that's something that we could take a look at also. To pay for compression, generally, the compression issues don't cost a lot if you look on them on an individual departmental basis. You're looking at $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. A lot of times those departments will have the flexibility within their budgets to cover that for the year. So I'm not as concerned about those individual compression issues. But until I do the full analysis, I just want to reserve judgment that I don't have a full fiscal impact yet. And then finally, an option that we have is to create a new policy that would allow the county administrator to grant employees under specific criteria additional steps on the wage grid. I've been resistant to this for quite a while. The HR director has suggested it, mostly because it only puts me in a bad position. Because if I have to say no to someone, they're not going to be happy. But it's an issue that we have. Someone says, well, I have a job offer. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to make $5,000 more. What can you do for me? The answer is nothing. I don't have any ability. There's no provisions within our current rules and policies that allow me to do anything to maintain competitiveness and retain that employee. If they were a good employee and I really wanted to, I still can't do anything for them. So that would be a policy that would allow something along those lines to help in that situation. So those are the three ideas I have, and I'm sure Tara can add some additional information if you need it.
I can add a little bit of information about what other counties are doing. I do have a list of 35 other counties in one city and their plans for next year, and every county is doing a COLA, anywhere from 1% in January, 1% in July, to up to 6%. A lot of those counties, the majority of them that are offering a COLA that's up to 7% actually. If they're offering a COLA that's 6 and 7%, those counties aren't doing additional steps, but for the ones underneath that, over half of them are still doing a step. So I think we're recognizing this isn't just a St. Croix County issue. It really is, we're really having challenges bringing in new employees that we don't have to pay more than our existing, like Administrator Witt mentioned, and it's creating a lot of stress and unease for our leadership and morale issues for our existing employees. And so just trying to think of a creative way to be able to continue to retain our good employees. So that's one of the reasons why we're talking about this. But I did see the other counties are all offering another COLA of the 36 that responded.
I think the COLA idea is very good. We do need to, that way we're kind of hitting the whole workforce and going somewhere with it. The administrator's policy, I guess I wouldn't have a major objection to it, just so we'd have some safeguards and maybe subject to approval by somebody, administration committee or whoever after the fact. I don't know, that's just my initial thoughts on it, but those two things, and obviously the the other two, I'm not sure how we cover that, but I'd be open to suggestions too.
I'm kind of, this is a really interesting issue, and I don't think it's unique to our county or public employees. I don't think it's unique to the private sector as well. So one thing that I was going to do, and I haven't had an opportunity to do this, I was going to have a discussion with Bill Rubin and see if we could get this topic on the EDC agenda, because we have a lot of business leaders in the county on that board, and we might be able to get a little better idea of, okay, how is the private sector also responding? It might be good information, but it might give us some other ideas on some things we might consider as well. So I'll pursue that with the EDC and Bill for the next EDC board meeting. Between the options, I think the first one, as Supervisor Peterson pointed out, it seems pretty reasonable because it kind of affects everybody. So we're kind of recognizing that everybody's in the same boat, and we're trying to do, what we can to start helping them out. Some of the other ones start getting a little subjective, which is where I personally get a little more uncomfortable, because you're not really addressing all the situations. Maybe it's the squeaky wheel or and then it becomes, well, why didn't I get a raise or something along those lines, and it just becomes a little more challenging from an administrative standpoint, I would guess. So those are my thoughts.
Of the three options, the first I would address would be the compression. That is what is going to affect employee morale the greatest for our most seasoned employees and for new employees. And if compression is let to run wild, we're going to have a really big issue coming up in a couple of years because of it. So addressing the compression issue and figuring out where we have it happening and what departments and who is affected by it, I think would be our first course of action. At least that will send a strong message to our staff that we are looking at this and we are trying to come up with resolves to address this issue. I completely get number 3. And I can tell you from personal experience, we are having the darndest time in finding staff because it is so competitive in the market, especially experienced, degreed staff. Very difficult. So having the ability to go to a staff member who has had multiple headhunter calls or offers and say, this is what we can do for you, it can really be a lifesaver. And for what we're expending, we're actually saving money from going through that employment search or hiring a headhunter for someone who's specialized. So looking at putting together some type of policy language which creates parameters that not only insulates the administrator from negative remarks or staff from having to have undue thoughts, but creates a flowing policy that everyone can be comfortable with. The COLA adjustment, it's not, as we've already heard from HR, 1% is below what anyone else is even looking at or implementing. So I think we need to get really creative here, because otherwise, if you speak with another county and they're going up to 3%, it's kind of a slap in the face at 1%. And maybe that's what our budget can withstand, and maybe it's not, but we need to have some good flow of information to our staff so that they understand exactly what we can do and what we can afford in this fiscal cycle.
This is an important issue. I mean, the retention of our good employees is so critical to the services we're providing. I have a couple questions. Do we know offhand if there are compression issues in one department over the other? Is that something that, based on this background information, that you would take a look at? And then my other question is regarding the COLA. It references the use of contingency funds. Are there other sources that we could look at in our budget, or is that really our option for that funding, if we were to go that route?
I can answer the first question. I'll let Ken answer the second part, or Leah. But yes, I could name about a handful of departments right now where we have some very real compression. There's probably more. We notice it more during recruitments. So in those departments where we're trying to recruit right now, we are seeing a lot of turn down offers because we don't want to offer them more than our existing staff, but they're not going to come on board if we don't. So we have gaps in hiring because of that issue. So yes, that is very real, and I could identify, I won't right now, but I could identify at least 4 to 5 departments right now that are having that issue.
Yeah, the second part of your question, is there other funding sources? I mean, you have unassigned fund balance. I mean, you can. Those create structural deficits, so you're foregoing next year's increases to do an increase now. It's a one-time, short-time fix, and it just pushes the problem, creates actually a bigger problem later on. So I was trying to minimize that by using the contingency funds. And then really, it'll get into the next item, the budgeting process. But Tara and I were talking, and I really think I have a 3-year plan for how to address some of these things once we get into the next 2023 budget cycle, which will cover some of these issues. So in the next few months, we'll lay all that out. But so yes, I can always go bigger, but going bigger has other implications.
Okay, so then my follow-up question for the first proposal with the 1% COLA, given the information that you provided us that other counties are going somewhere between 1% and 7%, and the issues that it sounds like we have the compression, is 1% going to even make a difference in the issues we're having? I'm just kind of looking for an honest perspective on that.
Yeah. So our STEP program with the 18 steps that we have is not the normal. So the size of our STEP at 2.5 to 2 to 1.5 is larger than most communities. So while you'll say, yes, they're having a 2% COLA and they're doing a STEP, their STEP program may be significantly different. I was just on a call yesterday, and one of them was talking, and their steps are, once you hit 10 years, you get a STEP. And so, I mean, significantly different than how our STEP program is structured. And so every county has a different program with different size steps. We have more steps and bigger steps than probably most, if not all, the other counties, I would say, which is part of the reason why we haven't been doing the COLAs. We've been relying on the steps for compensation increases. This year, though, it's really not cutting it with a 6.8% CPI.
I'm not sure that we gave you what you were looking for. Probably generated more questions than answers. I guess I would suggest that maybe we continue looking into number 1, possibly trying to identify certain departments that have compression issues, try to get a little better handle on that, and then come back and revisit the issue again. Because really, the number 1, you're not talking about the adjustment until April 1st anyhow. And in the meantime, I'll see what other information we can get to get a little better idea of what's happening in the private sector, because I think it's probably going to be very similar.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, what I think we'll do is we'll work on all three of them. It doesn't commit you to any of them. We'll bring them back individually as they are developed, and you can evaluate them on their own merits then as you have more detail and you've had more time to think about it. And each of these will take several months to compile and put together. So,
If there was maybe some way too, and I know it'd be very difficult, but maybe some kind of a wild ballpark figure, what each area might run into expense-wise for us. That way we'd have something to compare also.
yep, absolutely.
Okay, any other comments or suggestions, bright ideas? We need some of those, I guess, don't we? Okay, I guess we'll move on now to consideration of the 2023 budgeting process and timeline. Ken?
All right. Another one where I need your input. So last year was the first year when we started the process earlier. We had started that with a committee of the whole in March and brought the department heads in, and they talked about what their issues are and where they think things are going in their departments. And we were able to put together our budget priorities, which were adopted in May, then went to April admin and May county board. This year, in March, if we make a committee of the whole presentation, we don't have any meetings scheduled in April at all. So it kind of throws a big speed bump right in the middle of that budget process, the way we had done it last year. So I wanted to know what your thoughts were, but let me just say that pushing it back and starting it after the next county board election is not a viable option. That'll push everything too far out, and we won't meet a proper timeline. So I don't know, I'm open to ideas, and just so I understand what your expectations are.
Well, I'll throw out a few comments. I don't really see any problem in starting the process in March. I know that, well, at least it kind of creates a blueprint, so to speak, of what the new board would at least have something to look at. Because we're going to have some new board members who are going to be pretty green, and the whole process is going to be new to them. So starting it out with the new board doesn't seem like the logical thing to do, at least to me. So if we go ahead and start the process in March, as we did last year, and then the new board would have something to look at and go from there. And maybe there'll be some adjustments based on some of the new board supervisors, but at least we're getting the process started. So I think that's important.
What would you also think of, in the early March start, I'd go along with. In April, you usually try to run that orientation session in April. I'm thinking something like committee of the whole, and maybe you could address the budget issues as presented forth from March at that time, kind of kill two birds with one stone, just a thought.
So are you saying instead of the March committee of the whole presentation, do that in April? Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
So looks like we're kind of agreeing that we need to get the process started in March.
All right. Department heads are now on notice. We have a March committee of the whole. You'll need to make a presentation at that. Yeah. Well, I think that April will be more of a summary recap and sort of a finalization of where we're at. So to give them a chance to ask questions about it for the new members. But really, anyone that's running for office, they might want to come to that March committee of the whole if they think they're going to win.
Okay, any other suggestions? All right, let's move on to number 8, Our last business item, consideration of the next steps in the Government Center project.
All righty. So the building subcommittee had laid out a process for us, and we followed that with, basically it was our communication or education phase. So we've gone through that now. We did our open houses, we've done a presentation to the county board, we got the website up and running, we reached out to media, which has picked up the story and run it in the paper. And really, you know, overall, I think the feedback has been pretty good on the project. I think there's a lot of understanding about the need for a project of this scope. So I think we're at a point now where we're ready to take that next step. I just want to make sure that the admin committee is comfortable with that, and you understand what those next steps are and the implications of those steps. So the next step would be, I think anyways, an authorizing resolution for the bond issue. So we would establish the amount to be borrowed potentially. So an authorizing resolution authorizes me to solicit the bids. The county board still has to adopt and approve those. That becomes a majority vote then after the authorizing resolution is approved. So that's a couple-month process in between. An authorizing resolution sets a cap, a top cap. The selling of the bonds doesn't always have to be at that. You know, we had talked about, if you were on the subcommittee or read any of their minutes, we talked about doing it in 3 bond issues. You could do it in multiple bond issues or 1 bond issue. Considering the interest rates right now, I think we're going to look at 1 bond issue. But those are the steps within that bond issuance and what that authorizing resolution does for us. After that authorizing resolution, we would need a budget amendment if you want us to start the architectural design in 2022. Right now, we have this project slated for 2023 to start, but if we're going to borrow the money now, I have a certain time limit to spend the money, so we need to start working on the spending part also once we do the bond issue. We could delay the bond issue for a year, although I think interest rates are so low right now, it's probably a really good time to do it. You'll save the taxpayers more money by doing it a year early than waiting a year and paying a higher interest rate. So a budget amendment would be the second step in that, and then finally we would select an architect. At that point, once you've approved the budget amendment, you're turning it over to staff. Jim's going to contract with an architect, and we're going to start the design.
Comments? Supervisor Peterson?
I think, of course, having been on the building committee, I'm all for this. I think that we do have to move forward. In my opinion, it is something that we're going to need. If not now, we're going to need it in a couple of years. I noticed in the news last week, I think the Fed's talking about raising interest rates 3 times this coming year. And not to be stampeded, but I think doing our due diligence, we should move forward.
And I was also on the subcommittee, so I'd really like to hear from Supervisor Ard and Supervisor Cook to make sure that we're hopefully on the same page, or not.
We know that we're going to need this expansion. As we've already heard from the administrator, waiting is going to cost us more. In every project I've been involved in, if you wait, you pay more. We have excellent interest rates at this time within the bond market. This is the time to move forward before the interest rates do start going up. So my full support is behind this.
Can I ask a question? The next step is the authorizing resolution. What's the timeline for that when you say next step? Like, what are you thinking of from a timeline perspective for this committee or the board?
Yep, so the process for an authorizing resolution would come to the administration committee. So the soonest we could have that would be the January admin committee. It'd be then the February county board. And that's the big vote. That's the vote that requires a 3/4 vote of the full county board to approve an authorizing bonding resolution. February 1st, I think that is. So that's the formal process. From there, with that resolution adopted, if adopted, I would then start the process of the bond issue. That takes about 2 months, but we could potentially have, it'd probably put us at the May County Board, but a May bond sale. So that's when you'd be locking in the interest rates.
Go ahead.
Do you need a motion for this now, Ken, or just direction from the board?
You know, I don't need a motion because you're not taking any formal action tonight. I just need to know what direction you want to go, what timeline you want to run, to make sure that we're all on the same page.
My personal opinion is I think we need to get most of it done if we can before the February board meeting so that that board has a chance to act on it, and then so be it. You know, it goes forward from there. If ultimately the new board decides something way different, that's their issue. But I think we've done all the work. We've done the study on it and the background information, so it just makes sense to me to have it done in February if we can.
I would certainly agree with that. I think we really need to move forward as quickly as we can on this. And of course, I was the ultimate skeptic on this whole process. This is why I put myself on that subcommittee. And, and I'm absolutely convinced that, you know, we have to do this. So I think we need to move forward.
So two clarifying points then, so I understand the sentiment. So on the authorizing resolution, so when I bring that back next month for your first review of that, there's a couple of details that I need to build into that. So I don't want to make any assumptions on that. One is the total dollar amount of that authorizing resolution. So I was going to use the $87 million, which is the full project cost, even though it's potential that the City of Hudson, if they're a partner, would do a capital upfront contribution. There's no guarantee of that because we have not worked that detail out. They may end up going with the lease and us paying for it up front. So that's an option. That's why I was going to go with the higher of the dollar amounts. We could alter the sale resolution then if we work that out before we get to the sale point and only sell 77 million of bonds, even though you're authorizing 87. That doesn't mean we have to sell all of it. But so I'm making an assumption of 87 million as the authorizing resolution. That's the first part, and my reasoning on why I'm doing it that way.
Nodding heads.
Yep. So the second part then is when you do a bond resolution, an authorizing resolution, you can only use those bond proceeds for what you say you're going to use them for. So we want to do the government center expansion project. But the question then comes in of, holy cow, we're 15 million under budget because, you know, prices dropped. We had a really great design and we thought it would be 87 million, but now it's only, you know, 70 million. We're so far under budget, but we borrowed all this money. So I have this extra, you know, 10 or 15 million dollars left over. What am I going to do with it? If I do the authorizing resolution only for the government center project, I'm really stuck. And that's not a position we want to be in. So what we do on those is we always have a secondary clause. So that secondary clause typically has been other authorized KIP projects. When we did the highway facility, we did it different though. We did it as also building a highway facility and equipping the highway facility. So they ended up with between 1 and 2 million left over. They bought additional equipment for the highway facility with that. So my proposal, and it's because of conversations I've had with other county board supervisors, that we narrow the scope of that secondary clause to any authorized park projects. So there's been a huge upswell for park projects within the county. There's the Eckerd Blufflands project, which they estimate the first phase of at $10.2 million. So if by some chance we came way under on the government center project, that would offer us the opportunity to start that project or to do some of the other park projects. So I wanted to offer that up and have that as a discussion point, so I knew how to do the initial draft of the resolution.
I'm not trying to hog the, I'm not in the chair right now, so I can talk. My one concern about that restricting it only to park is the, how do I want to say this, maybe the chances of passing that, ultimately that resolution for bonding. And what concerns me is there may be enough supervisors that would have enough problem with that narrow scope that may jeopardize that. That's my concern.
Couldn't we, I mean, can we broaden that a little just to include KIP projects? And then that gives us a lot more flexibility depending upon, you know, we could, you know, allocate some of that toward parks, or we could allocate it to other projects that are needed that would give us a little more flexibility. Is that a possibility?
Oh, absolutely, and that would have been probably my initial recommendation, is that, or any authorized capital improvement project of the county that they may have, which does include park projects. I just know that I've had a talking to by several members of the Community Development Committee, and this was their preference, because they feel that the parks are underfunded at times.
Thank you. I don't disagree that there are times when the parks are underfunded. However, in the state of affairs that we are currently sitting with Delta and Omicron, and we do not know what is going to be happening coming in the future, I would feel much more comfortable and certainly would vote for a resolution which included capital improvement projects or other prioritized projects, because we don't know what's going to happen. And frankly, narrowing the scope to parks, whilst yes, we have beautiful parks and community development does a phenomenal job of ever improving them, it's hard for me to sell that to constituents when they're coming to me for utility assistance. I would much rather leave this, because bonding for $87 million is going to be a hard penny for a lot of people to swallow. A lot of pennies. Let's try and keep this open so that we can look at it and apply those funds to projects which will be prioritized and most needed by the county.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think other authorized KIP projects is how we should word it. I mean, well, I love to see our parks built out. We just don't know at the time what's our priority capital project going to be. So I think that would be better choice.
That's why I asked the questions.
Now you have an answer.
I think I got your sentiment. That is all I have for tonight.
Did you need any further projects? Did we give enough?
Okay, so are you set on the, moving forward on the government center expansion project?
Yes, so I will have, for the next administration committee, an authorizing resolution authorizing the borrowing of up to $87 million for a government center expansion or any other authorized capital improvement project. I think that'll be the exact title.
Okay. All right, well, I guess that actually concludes our business items for this evening. Any request for future agenda items? Okay, announcements or correspondence? Okay, I guess not. Okay, then with that, at 6:14, we'll adjourn the meeting. The date of our next meeting is on January 18th 2022. And I hope everybody has an enjoyable and safe holiday. And we'll see you next year. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.